I'm Emma Rose, 34 years old, and my life changed forever on a Tuesday morning that began like any other. It was early autumn, and the air smelled of crisp leaves and fresh possibilities. My husband Alex was in the kitchen making dinosaur-shaped pancakes for our daughter Mia, who was just 7 years old. He always did the breakfast routine on Tuesdays. It was their special little tradition. I was packing Mia's lunch, slipping in a note with a silly drawing I'd made while she was sleeping. I remember thinking how lucky we were, how even the smallest moments felt like treasures. But by noon, my life was no longer recognizable. Alex and I met during my final year at the University of Michigan. He was the charming teaching assistant in my economics class who offered to help me make sense of fiscal policy over coffee. I was smitten before I even realized it. His laughter could light up a room, and the way he always listened, really listened, made me feel seen in a way I hadn't known I needed. We fell in love in those messy, sweet college years, and after graduation, we eloped on a warm spring day with just a handful of close friends. We had built a life in Chicago where Alex worked as a financial advisor, always striving to balance his career with our family's needs. I worked part-time as a graphic designer, spending the rest of my days caring for Mia. Our home was full of warmth, filled with the artwork Mia brought home from school, and the shelves were lined with Alex's baseball memorabilia, each piece a testament to his love for the game. Alex had always been my rock, the steady hand guiding us through the challenges of life. But there were small signs I should have paid closer attention to: occasional chest pains he brushed off, as stress, breathlessness, he blamed on the lack of time for exercise. His doctor had suggested minor lifestyle changes, but Alex, ever the optimist, believed he was fine. That morning after breakfast, Alex kissed me and Mia goodbye and reminded me to buy real maple syrup instead of the cheap corn syrup junk he hated. It's such a small detail now, but it's the last thing he said to me. I didn't know those words would be the final punctuation in our life together. I was working on a new client project when my phone rang. It was Claire, Alex's assistant at the firm. Her voice was thin and shaky, like she was trying to hold back a storm of tears. "Emma, it's Alex." He collapsed during a meeting. "They're taking him to Northwestern Memorial." My coffee cup slipped from my hands, shattering on the tile floor in a burst of noise that echoed my heart. I called our neighbor Sarah to pick up Mia from school. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely find my car keys. I remember speeding down Lakeshore Drive, each traffic light, feeling like a personal attack. I whispered prayers. I wasn't even sure I believed in promising anything, if he could just be okay. But I was too late. By the time I arrived, Alex was already gone. A massive heart attack, the doctor said. He was only 36 years old. I remember the sterile smell of the hospital room, the bright lights that seemed to mock the darkness, swallowing me whole. I touched his face, still warm, half expecting him to wake up and tell me it was a mistake. I don't know how long I stayed there, lost in the space between disbelief and horror. The nurses were kind, but their words barely registered. Everything was a blur: paperwork, phone calls, the weight of decisions I never wanted to make, burial or cremation flowers, or donations in lieu of. I felt like a marionette moving through the motions because there was no other choice. The hardest part was telling Mia. I picked her up from Sarah's house, her backpack covered in patches and stickers she loved. She ran to me, her eyes bright with excitement about the class trip to the museum next week. My heart broke all over again. "Where's Daddy?" she asked. "He promised to take me to the zoo on Saturday." I pulled the car over, tears streaming down my face. "Sweetie, Daddy got very sick today. His heart stopped working and he's not coming home." Mia's face crumpled. "Can't the doctors fix it?" she asked, her voice small and scared. "No, baby," I whispered. "They couldn't fix it. Daddy died today." She screamed then, a sound so raw and primal, it made my chest ache. She buried her face in my shoulder, her small body shaking. All I could do was hold her, my own tears mixing with hers, as the world outside our car kept turning oblivious to the end of ours. That night, I let Mia sleep in our bed, wrapped in one of Alex's old sweatshirts. She clung to it like it was a lifeline. After she finally drifted into a restless sleep, I sat in the bathroom, the cold tile pressing against my legs, and let myself break apart. My phone buzzed with messages from friends, condolences from people I hadn't spoken to in years. But the people I needed most, my parents, were nowhere to be found. I called them, desperate for comfort, but when my mother answered, laughter and clinking glasses echoed in the background. "Emma, can I call you back? We're at your sister Sophie's engagement dinner." My sister Sophie was always the center of attention, and even in this moment, my grief seemed like an inconvenience. "Mom," I choked out. "Alex is gone. He died this morning." There was a pause too long. "Oh, Emma, that's terrible. But Sophie's waited so long for this party. Can we talk tomorrow?" I ended the call before she could say more. I felt like I was drowning, like my pain didn't even register with them. The loneliness was worse than the grief. That night, Mia woke up crying for her father, and I held her close, whispering that we would find a way to keep going. I didn't know how, but I promised her and myself that we would. The days after Alex's death passed in a haze. I moved through them like a ghost, each moment feeling surreal. There were funeral arrangements to make a child to comfort, and a house that felt too big and too quiet without Alex's laughter echoing through the halls. Mia and I spent most of our time in her room reading her favorite bedtime stories, long past bedtime. She clung to me, and I clung to her. The mornings were the worst, waking up to the sharp emptiness where Alex used to lie, his warmth already fading from the sheets. Each day, I'd get up, shower, and put on makeup, trying to look presentable for Mia. But inside, I felt like I was made of paper, ready to tear apart with the slightest breeze. The funeral was scheduled for that Saturday. Mia wanted to wear a bright yellow dress, because Daddy always said yellow was like sunshine, she told me, her small voice breaking my heart. I tried to smile and told her she would be Daddy's little ray of light. I chose a simple black dress, the one Alex always said made me look like a movie star, though I felt like anything but. My parents promised to come, though their phone calls were short and perfunctory. "We'll be there," my mother said, her voice clipped. "Don't worry." I wished I could believe her. On the morning of the funeral, Mia and I stood in front of the mirror. I brushed her hair into a neat braid, just like Alex used to do for her on special days. "You look beautiful, sunshine," I whispered. She tried to smile, but her eyes were too big, too sad. When we arrived at the funeral home, the air was heavy with the scent of lilies and polished wood. Friends and colleagues gathered, their hushed voices blending into a low hum of sorrow. Alex's parents, Robert and Diana, were already there, holding hands and looking like they'd aged 10 years overnight. Diana hugged me tight, whispering, "We're here for you, Emma." Always. My parents were nowhere in sight. Mia held my hand tightly, her little fingers like lifelines. I greeted people I barely knew, accepting their condolences like a broken record. "Thank you for coming. Yes, he was a wonderful man. We're doing as well as we can." Words that felt hollow in my mouth. 10 minutes before the service was supposed to start, my parents finally arrived. They made a small commotion, apologizing for traffic, and looking around like they were attending a cocktail party rather than a funeral. My mother's perfume was overwhelming, and my father's eyes darted around the room, avoiding mine. Sophie was with them, her engagement ring catching the light as she checked her phone for notifications. The service began, and I forced myself to sit still to be the composed widow everyone expected me to be. Mia sat on my lap, clutching a small stuffed dinosaur Alex had given her the previous Christmas. When the pastor asked if anyone wanted to share memories, I felt like I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then Robert, Alex's father, stood up. His voice cracked as he spoke about Alex's kindness, his loyalty, his laughter. Diana held Mia's hand, whispering how much Alex loved her. I felt like I was in a movie, watching someone else's life play out in front of me. But then I saw Mia's tear-streaked face, and I knew I had to stand up for her, for Alex. I rose, my legs trembling. "Alex loved us fiercely," I said, my voice shaking. "He was the kind of man who would stay up all night helping a friend in need, or learn how to braid his daughter's hair just because she asked him to. He wasn't perfect, he hated cilantro, and always lost his keys, but he was ours, and we loved him for exactly who he was." As I spoke, I could see my parents shifting uncomfortably. My father checked his watch twice, and my mother's lips were pursed in that way she had when she thought I was making too much of a fuss. But I didn't care. This was for Alex. After the service, we went back to our house for a small reception. My friends and Alex's colleagues helped with everything, bringing food, taking care of Mia, when I needed a moment to myself. My parents hovered in the background, offering polite words to strangers, but never once asking how I was really doing. Sophie flitted around, telling anyone who would listen about her wedding plans, as if today was just another event to check off her calendar. It was Robert and Diana who truly supported me. Robert quietly cleaned up dishes in the kitchen, while Diana made sure Mia had something to eat. "She's too thin," Diana said softly, her hand on Mia's hair. "We'll make sure she's okay." I wanted to believe her. After the last guest left, my parents made a show of saying their goodbyes. "We'll call you," my mother said, her tone as bright and fake as the smile on her lips. "Let us know if you need anything." But I knew better. They would call when it suited them, not when I needed them. That night, Mia crawled into bed beside me. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice small in the dark. "Why did Grandma and Grandpa look so bored today? Weren't they sad about Daddy?" I swallowed hard, brushing her hair back from her forehead. "I don't know, sweetie," I said honestly. "Sometimes people don't know how to show how they feel." "But we do," she said, and wrapped her arms around me. "We miss him so much." "Yes, we do," I said, my own tears soaking into her hair. In the days that followed, my parents called a handful of times, their conversations always turning to practical matters. Life insurance, financial details, what I planned to do with Alex's investments. It felt cold, like they'd reduced my husband to a ledger entry. My father even had the gall to ask if I'd considered sharing some of it with them, "just until we get through a few rough months," he said. I ended the call shaking with anger. It was like the funeral had been nothing more than an obligation for them, a chance to show their faces, and then go back to their lives. But I couldn't let their coldness infect my heart. I wouldn't let it shape the way Mia remembered her father. Every night I told her stories about Alex, about how he'd make her giggle with his silly voices, about how he'd dance around the kitchen in his socks, about how he'd loved us so completely. And every day, I forced myself to get up and keep going. I didn't know what the future looked like, but I knew this: I wouldn't let my parents' greed or indifference define the legacy Alex left behind. His love was bigger than that, and so was mine. As I lay awake in the dark, I thought about the strength it would take to stand up to them, to protect what Alex had built for Mia and me. I didn't know if I had that strength yet, but I would find it. For Alex. For Mia. For me. 2 weeks after the funeral, just as Mia and I were beginning to find a fragile rhythm in our days, my parents showed up unannounced on a gray Monday morning. I'd just gotten back from dropping Mia at school, the house unusually still and quiet. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sorting through insurance paperwork I could barely focus on when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw my mother adjusting her scarf, my father standing stiffly behind her. I took a deep breath and opened the door. "Mom, Dad," I said, my voice calm but wary. "I didn't know you were coming." "We thought we'd check in," my mother said breezily, brushing past me into the house. My father gave me a small nod before following her in. "How's Mia doing? Is she at school? Good." "We wanted to talk privately." I didn't miss the way my father's eyes flicked around the living room, lingering on the new television Alex had bought last Christmas. My stomach tightened. "Coffee?" I asked automatically, slipping back into the role of dutiful daughter, even as my heart thudded with suspicion. They sat on the couch like they owned the place, and I busied myself in the kitchen, taking slow breaths to steady my nerves. When I returned with 2 steaming mugs, my mother launched right in. "Emma, we're worried about you," she said, her voice honey sweet but with that familiar edge. "You've been through so much, and of course there's Mia to think about. Which brings us to why we're here." I set the coffee down carefully. "Which is," my father cleared his throat, always the one to deliver the bottom line. "Emma, your mother and I are not getting any younger. With Alex gone and the insurance payout, we think it's time you considered how to support the family." He said it like a foregone conclusion, as though my husband's death had simply created an opportunity for them. I stared at them, stunned. Support the family, I echoed. Yes, my mother said quickly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. You know how your father's health has been, and with Sophie's wedding coming up. These are expensive times. We thought, given your current situation, you'd want to help out. The audacity of it left me momentarily speechless. My husband's death was still an open wound, and here they were, asking for money. You think I should give you part of the life insurance money, I said flatly. Not give, my father corrected smoothly. Think of it as investing in family stability. We raised you, Emma. We paid for your college, helped you and Alex buy this house. It's only fair. I felt the rage building a hot, pulsing force in my chest. Fair, I repeated slowly, tasting the word like poison. You weren't there for me when Alex died. You barely showed up at the funeral. And now, you're here to take what he worked so hard to give Mia. My mother's face flushed pink. Don't be so emotional, she said sharply. We're trying to be practical. Family helps family. Family helps family, I snapped. But you didn't help me. You didn't help Mia. You just want money. My hands were shaking, but I didn't care. My father set his mug down on the coffee table with deliberate precision. Emma, don't make this harder than it needs to be. 50% of the payout would ensure we're comfortable and still leave you and Mia plenty. 50%, my voice cracked in disbelief. You want half of what's meant to protect Mia's future? My mother's lips thinned. Emma, be reasonable. We're your parents. No, I said, my voice trembling but firm. You don't get to come here and take from Mia. Alex worked for that money. He made sure we'd be okay. My father's eyes went cold. Don't forget who took care of you your whole life, Emma. You owe us. I owe you nothing, I said, my voice hard as stone. Now get out of my house. My mother gasped. How dare you get? Out, I repeated, and this time they saw I meant it. They left in a huff, my father muttering about ungrateful children, and my mother's tears carefully arranged to look sincere. When the door shut behind them, I slumped against it, every muscle shaking. I felt like I just fought a war. I thought that would be the end of it. But the next morning, my phone was flooded with messages. Emma, this isn't how family works. You're being selfish. We deserve better than this. Some were from my parents, some from Sophie, who had apparently heard everything and taken their side. I wanted to block them all, but part of me still hoped they'd come to their senses. I didn't want Mia to lose her grandparents entirely, but I wouldn't let them steal her future. That evening, I called Robert and Diana. When they answered, I couldn't hold back the tears. I don't know what to do, I confessed. They want half of it, half of what Alex left us. Oh, Emma, Diana murmured, her voice warm and steady. You don't owe them anything. Alex made sure of that. He loved you and Mia so much. Don't let them take that from you. I felt a small flicker of strength inside me, like a candle in the dark. Thank you, I whispered. For everything. We're family, Emma Roberts said. Real family. We're here for you, no strings attached. After the call, I went to check on Mia. She was working on a craft project at her desk, surrounded by paper and glue and bright markers. Mommy, she said seriously, I'm making a memory book for Daddy. So we don't forget. Tears filled my eyes. That's beautiful, sweetheart. She looked up at me, her face so much like Alex's in that moment. I remember what Daddy said once, she told me. He said sometimes you have to stand up to people who want to take things that aren't theirs. My throat tightened. He was right. Mia nodded. We're going to keep his love safe, right, always, I promised. That night, I lay in bed, my mind racing with everything that had happened. My parents' betrayal felt like another loss, layered on top of Alex's death. But Mia's quiet bravery reminded me what was really at stake. I had to protect her, protect what Alex had worked for, what he'd wanted for us. For the first time since Alex died, I didn't feel like I was just surviving. I felt like I was ready to fight. The morning after my parents' visit, I woke up feeling like the air in our house had shifted. There was a tension in the walls, a sense that the fragile piece Mia and I had been clinging to had finally cracked. I packed her lunch extra carefully, tucking in a note with a smiling sun, and walked her to the bus stop like I always did. She kissed my cheek, her small arms wrapping around me. "I love you, Mommy," she said in her sweet, earnest voice. "I love you too, Sunshine," I told her, and watched the bus pull away, carrying her off to a world I hoped would be kinder than the one she'd find at home. Back in the quiet house, I called Thomas the lawyer, who'd handled our estate planning. He'd been Alex's friend since college, someone who knew how thorough Alex was. I explained what my parents had demanded, and how they were already using guilt and manipulation to try to get their hands on the money. Emma Thomas said, his voice calm but firm. Alex was very clear when he set up the life insurance and his will. "You're the sole beneficiary. Legally, they have no claim no matter what they say." I exhaled shakily. "But they're pushing Thomas. They're relentless. I'm worried they'll try something drastic." He paused. "I'll send you a letter, something formal you can show them if they keep harassing you. And Emma, don't let them make you doubt yourself. This is about Mia and your future, not theirs." I thanked him and hung up, feeling steadier for the first time in days. Still, the thought of confronting my parents again made my stomach knot. I busied myself around the house, trying to scrub away the memories of their entitled expressions. But no matter how many dishes I washed, or how many times I wiped down the counters, I couldn't shake the weight of their demands. That evening, as Mia colored at the table, the doorbell rang. My stomach dropped. Through the peephole, I saw my parents again, my father's face set in that tight, forced smile he used when he thought he was being reasonable. I took a deep breath and opened the door. "Emma," he said, his tone polite but insistent, "we really need to have a proper conversation. Can we come in? I didn't want them in my house, but I also knew I needed to face them head on." "Fine," I said, stepping back. They came in, settling themselves on the couch as if they owned the place. My father launched in immediately. "We've been talking to some family members," he said, his tone almost casual. "They agree that you should share what Alex left behind. It's only fair." I felt a flicker of anger. "Family members who weren't here when I needed them," I said, my voice calm but icy. "Family who didn't even check on Mia after Alex died." My mother's lips pursed. "Emma, don't be dramatic. Everyone's trying to help you see reason." "You mean help me give you money?" I shot back. "Alex didn't work his whole life for you to go on cruises and buy new cars. He did it for Mia and me." My father's expression hardened. "We're your parents. We deserve to be taken care of in our old age. You have more than enough." "No," I interrupted. "You don't get to decide what's enough for me and Mia." My mother leaned forward, her eyes bright with false concern. "Emma, think about what you're doing. Do you really want to cut yourself off from your family? From Sophie? Always the golden child." I thought of her sitting at Alex's funeral, scrolling through her phone as if she were bored. "Sophie has never cared about Mia or me," I said. "She only cares about herself, and so do you." My father's jaw tightened. "Emma, you're being unreasonable." I stood my ground. "No, I'm being a mother. I'm protecting my daughter. Now leave." They left in a flurry of offended pride, my mother's tears carefully arranged for maximum effect, my father's cold anger radiating from his stiff shoulders. As the door closed behind them, I felt the house sigh around me, like it too had been holding its breath. That night, after Mia went to sleep, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the legal documents Thomas had sent me. They felt like a shield, a promise that Alex had left to protect us. I thought about all the nights he'd stayed up late reading over insurance policies and retirement accounts, making sure we'd be safe if anything ever happened to him. He'd known I'd need this strength, and he'd given it to me in every line of those papers. The next morning, the phone call started. My mother's voice on voicemail, soft and pleading. "Emma, please don't shut us out. We're family." My father's texts, terse and demanding. "You're making a mistake. We expect a family meeting this Sunday. Be there." But what they didn't understand was that this wasn't about money. It was about respect. About the kind of family I wanted Mia to grow up in, one built on love and loyalty, not manipulation. Sunday came, and with it, the gathering my parents insisted on. I didn't want to go, but part of me knew I had to face them one last time, to draw the final line they couldn't cross. Mia, sensing the heaviness in me, insisted on coming. "I want to be there, Mommy." she said, her chin set with that determined look she'd inherited from Alex. When we arrived at my childhood home, the tension was thick enough to choke on. My parents were already seated in the living room, my aunts and uncles gathered like an audience. Sophie was there too, wearing a smug little smile that made me want to scream. "Emma," my father began, "we're here because we care about you and Mia. But this situation has to be resolved." I stood there, Mia's small hand in mine, feeling the strength of her presence. "There's nothing to resolve," I said evenly. "Alex's wishes were clear. His life insurance and investments are for Mia's future, not yours." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Emma, please. We're family." I met her gaze without flinching. "Family is supposed to show up when you're falling apart. You didn't. You don't get to come for what isn't yours." The room fell silent. My father's face turned red, his mouth opening and closing, like a fish gasping for air. Sophie looked away, her phone finally forgotten. In that quiet, I felt something shift inside me. The fear I'd carried for so long fell away, replaced by a fierce clarity. I turned to leave, but Mia tugged my hand. "Wait, Mommy," she said softly. She reached into her small backpack and pulled out a piece of paper she'd been working on all week. She walked over to my father and handed it to him. It was a child's drawing a list she'd made, what real family does. Underneath were 3 bullet points in her careful printing. They show up. They care. They don't take what isn't theirs. My parents stared at it, and for the first time, they looked small to me. Like the illusions I'd carried about them were finally shattering. As Mia and I walked out of that house, the sun was shining brighter than it had in weeks. I held her hand tightly, knowing the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but certain of one thing: Alex's love and mine was enough to keep us standing. We were more than survivors. We were a family stronger and braver than they would ever understand. The days after the meeting at my parents' house were filled with a strange kind of silence. My phone barely rang, and when it did, it was friends checking in, not family. It was like the storm had passed, leaving a calm so unnerving it made my skin prickle. But in that quiet, I found a kind of peace I hadn't known I was craving. Mia and I slipped into a new routine. I started taking her to the library on weekends, where she would sit in the children's section with a stack of books bigger than her head. She loved reading about space, about how the stars were born from dust and fire. "Daddy would love this," she said once, her eyes wide with wonder. "He always said the stars were like wishes." I smiled, blinking back tears. "He'd love it, Sunshine. He'd be so proud of you." One night after Mia had gone to bed, I finally opened the file cabinet in Alex's office, the one he'd kept locked, except for when he was paying bills or updating his will. My hands shook as I rifled through the folders, the scent of his cologne still clinging to the papers. Near the back, I found a sealed envelope with my name on it. His handwriting neat and steady. My heart skipped a beat. I sat down on the edge of our bed and opened it with trembling fingers. "Emma, if you're reading this, it means something happened I couldn't protect you from. I hope it wasn't today or tomorrow, but years from now, when we're old and gray. I've always known you're stronger than you think. I've seen it in the way you love Mia, in the way you make a home out of nothing but laughter and warmth. I want you to remember that strength now. I've done my best to make sure you and Mia are taken care of. There's a trust for her education and a cushion for you to rebuild your life in whatever way feels right. Use it well. Live fully. And remember that the greatest gift you can give her is to show her that even in the hardest moments, love is what lasts. I love you. Always." "Alex," I pressed the letter to my chest, sobbing so hard, I thought my heart might crack open. In his quiet, steady way, Alex had been there all along, even when he couldn't be. His words felt like a balm, like a promise that I wasn't alone. The next morning, I called Thomas and asked about the trust Alex had mentioned. He confirmed it was secure, ironclad, he said, and that my parents had no legal right to any of it. "They might try to guilt you," he warned. "But they can't touch it, Emma. It's yours and Mia's. Period." I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I knew my parents wouldn't stop trying, but they couldn't take what mattered most. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail. The handwriting on the envelope was my father's neat and businesslike. I hesitated before opening it, half afraid of what it might say. Inside was a formal note written in the same tone he'd used my whole life to lecture me about responsibility and duty. Emma, we are disappointed in your behavior. You have always been headstrong, but this time you've gone too far. Refusing to support your parents in their time of need is a betrayal of the family values we raised you with. We are willing to give you one more chance to make this right. If you do not agree to a reasonable arrangement, we will be forced to reconsider our relationship with you and Mia. This is not a threat, it's a fact. Dad, I read it twice, my hands shaking with anger. How could they be so blind, so callous? They'd missed Alex's funeral in spirit, if not in presence, ignored my grief. And now they wanted to punish me for protecting Mia's future. I put the letter in the file cabinet with Alex's letter. Let them send their threats. Let them try. I knew now that I had the strength to stand up to them. Not just for me, but for Mia, and for the memory of the man who had loved us so completely. That evening, as I was making dinner, Mia came into the kitchen, her arms wrapped around a drawing she'd been working on all afternoon. "Mommy," she said solemnly, "I made this for Grandpa and Grandma." My heart sank. "Oh, sweetie, what did you make?" She turned the paper around, and I saw it was a picture of our little family, Alex, Mia, and me, holding hands under a sky full of stars. "I drew Daddy with us because he's still part of our family," she said simply. "I want them to see that." Tears pricked at my eyes. "That's beautiful sunshine," I said, hugging her tight. "But you know, sometimes people can't see what's right in front of them, and that's not your fault." She nodded slowly, wise beyond her years. "I know, but I wanted to try." The next day, I scanned her drawing and attached it to an email I wrote to my parents. The message was simple. I won't let you take what Alex left for Mia. I won't let you teach her that love comes with conditions or price tags. If you want to be in her life, you'll have to show her that family means more than money. I sent it, my hands steady on the keyboard, a boundary set in pixels and paper. After that, I blocked their numbers. I needed space to grieve, to heal, to figure out what came next. In the quiet, Mia and I found small ways to honor Alex's memory. We planted flowers in the garden he'd loved, watched his favorite baseball games on TV, and made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs on Saturday mornings. The simple things that reminded us he was still with us in spirit, if not in person. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Mia and I sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket. "Mommy," she said softly, her head resting on my shoulder. "Do you think Daddy can see us?" I looked up at the first stars winking in the darkening sky. "I think he sees us every time we laugh, every time we're kind, every time we remember how much he loved us." She was quiet for a moment, then whispered, "Then I'll keep laughing. And I'll keep being kind." I kissed the top of her head. That's all he would ever want. And in that quiet moment, I realized something. The battle lines with my parents were real, and they might try again. But I didn't have to fight them on their terms. I didn't have to be who they wanted me to be. I just had to be Mia's mother. I just had to be Alex's wife in the way that mattered now by living the kind of life he'd want for us. A life of love. A life of strength. A life that was truly ours. Spring arrived in Chicago with a burst of color, and for the first time since Alex's death, I felt like I could breathe again. The dogwoods in our yard bloomed their delicate white flowers bright against the blue sky. Mia spent hours outside weaving flower crowns and chasing butterflies. Watching her, I felt like I was watching hope come back to life. My parents had gone silent after the last email exchange. No more calls, no more texts. It was a relief, but also a strange emptiness. Part of me still ached for what could have been a family that came together in grief, that chose love over greed. But I knew now that wasn't who they were. And it was no longer my job to fix them. One Saturday morning, Marcus arrived on our doorstep, suitcases in hand, and a tired but excited smile on his face. He'd accepted a position at a nearby university just like he'd promised. Mia ran to him, throwing her arms around his waist. "Uncle Marcus," she squealed. "Hey, sunshine," he said, scooping her up. "I'm here for a while, ready to help you with your science fair project and all the pancakes you can eat." The joy in her laughter filled the house, banishing the shadows that had clung to our walls for too long. Over dinner that night, Marcus told me about his plans. "I want to help you with the foundation Alex dreamed about," he said. "Financial education for families who've never had that chance. We could make it a reality, Emma. Something to honor him." Tears welled in my eyes. He would love that, I whispered. He always believed in giving people the tools to build something better. "So do you?" Marcus said gently. It wasn't easy turning that dream into action. There were endless forms to fill out, calls to make, donations to seek. But every time I wanted to give up, I thought about Alex, about his belief that everyone deserved the chance to create a future they were proud of. And I thought about Mia watching me. I wanted her to see that even after the worst loss, you could still build something good. In the evenings, Mia and I worked together on her memory book for Alex. She filled the pages with drawings and stories, each one a tiny window into the love that still tied us together. One night, she looked up from her work and said, "Mommy, do you think Daddy would be proud of how brave we've been?" I smiled, brushing a tear from her cheek. "I think he'd be prouder than you could ever know." As the weeks turned into months, my parents tried once more to break the silence. A letter arrived in the mail, my mother's careful script across the envelope. Inside, she wrote about how they'd been seeing a family therapist, how they were trying to understand the hurt they'd caused. She said they missed Mia, missed me, and hoped we could find a way back to each other someday. I read it twice, my heart torn between skepticism and the small, stubborn hope that maybe people really could change. I tucked it away, not ready to decide, but willing to leave the door cracked open. Because Mia deserved that, a chance to choose for herself what kind of family she wanted. Meanwhile, I focused on the people who had shown up when it mattered. Robert and Diana became even more of a presence in our lives, filling in the gaps my parents had left. They taught Mia how to make Alex's favorite recipes, shared stories of his childhood, and reminded her every day that she was loved. One warm afternoon, we all gathered at the lake, where Alex used to take us for picnics. Mia and Robert fished off the dock, while Diana and I watched from the shore. "He'd be proud of you," Diana said softly, "of how you've stood your ground and kept your heart open." "I hope so," I said, my voice thick. "I hope he knows we're okay." She squeezed my hand. "He knows. And he's with you every time you choose love over fear." That night, Mia and I sat together on the porch, wrapped in a blanket against the cool breeze. She rested her head on my shoulder, her eyes wide and thoughtful. "Mommy," she said, "do you think we're like the stars?" Daddy said the stars are always there, even when we can't see them. I looked up at the sky, the first stars beginning to glimmer. "I think so," I said. "Even when it's dark, we still shine." She smiled, and in that moment, I knew we weren't just surviving anymore. We were living. Not the life I had planned, but one that was still full of love and light, built on the foundation Alex had left behind. As I tucked Mia into bed that night, I whispered, "We're going to be okay, sunshine." "Better than okay," she said sleepily, her eyes already closing. "We're going to be great." I stood in the doorway for a long time, watching her breathe. My brave girl. My reason for every hard choice I'd made. And in the quiet of that moment, I felt Alex's love wrapped around us like a promise. No matter what happened, we were enough. The next morning, I opened the website for the foundation Marcus and I had started. There it was, in bold letters. The Alex Rose Foundation, empowering families to build brighter futures. I clicked publish, my heart pounding with hope and resolve. In that click, I felt the weight of the past year fall away. My parents' betrayal, the grief that had nearly swallowed me, it was all still there, but it no longer defined us. What defined us now was the choice to keep going, to keep building, to keep loving. Because in the end, Alex was right. The greatest gift we could give Mia and ourselves was to keep moving forward no matter how hard it was. And so I did. If you've ever faced family betrayal during your hardest moments, or had to stand your ground to protect what matters most, know that you're not alone. Share your story in the comments, subscribe for more heartfelt journeys like this. And remember, your worth isn't measured by others' expectations, it's defined by your courage to honor what matters most.